Hello, everyone, and welcome. And welcome to all the AIs that are in the room. I'm just allowing all of them in, lots of note takers, which is great to see. Welcome. We're going to get started now. So just bear with us, so that a few more people are coming in. So just bear with me while I let those people in, and then we can get the session underway. So warm welcome to everyone. This is the Diversity Forum webinar on building an inclusive funding process, really looking at best practice today. So we need to start that. Bear with me. Again, lots of notifications coming in for the AIs. I should get used to this by now. But thank you all for taking the time to join us. I know you're all very busy. My name is Atlin. I'm one of the Diversity Forum Associates alongside JC Stewart. And it's fantastic to see you all here today. And we also have a number of our steering group members from the Diversity Forum. So welcome and thank you for joining. They are the driving force behind the Diversity Forum, and it's great to have their support. So I'd like to firstly thank everyone, the panel especially, for joining us today. We're hosting this series of webinars because we believe that fostering a more inclusive and equitable social investment landscape requires ongoing dialogue, knowledge sharing, and collaborative action. Many of our signatories, which some of you are here today, have expressed a strong commitment to creating truly inclusive funding processes and see this as a crucial step towards achieving our shared goals. By sharing best practices and learning from each other's experiences, we can collectively progress faster and deliver a better outcome for the sector, for social enterprises and the communities they support. So today we have a fantastic panel of experts who are passionate about building inclusive funding processes within their own organisations and the wider sector. They are Swati, who's here, the project manager from Pathway Fund, Mel Mills, many of you will know Mel from Better Society Capital, and Josh Robinson, who's a program manager from Access. So throughout this session, they'll be sharing their triumphs, challenges, and practical recommendations for other social investors to consider. So we've got a series of questions that we're going to be asking them. So I'm going to ask them to firstly to introduce themselves and then to answer the first question. Just bear with me, I'm going to try to spotlight everyone as well as we do that. So also, please feel free to pose any questions that you have throughout, but if that could be in the chat box. And then we will have a Q&A session towards the end of the discussion so that if you feel you want to come to the screen and ask your question, you can also do that. We've got a few more in the waiting room, so I'm just going to let those in and then we're going to start on the questions, okay? So firstly, if I could ask the panelists to introduce themselves and then to answer the question, to really give an example of how their organisation is working towards successfully implementing an inclusive funding process. So I'm going to kick off by asking Mel, if that's okay, to start off with introducing herself and asking that question.
Lovely, thank you, Atlin. I like to go first, not least because it really scares me when you say expert. So I think essentially this is all just part of learning. So for sorts of people I do know on the call, some that I don't. So my name's Mel Mills. I work at Better Society Capital. I head up our social sector engagement work, and hopefully most of you will know about Good Finance, which is mainly a digital tool, but has some offline support as well that helps social enterprises and charities to hopefully navigate this world of social investment. I've worked at Better Society Capital, I can't believe this, almost 10 years, not quite yet. But before that, I did run a social enterprise for 5 years. So I can honestly say I have been on both sides of the fence and I've tried to raise investment as well. It's been a journey. I look forward to chatting alongside the other panelists today.
Thank you, Mel. Swati, can we go to you now, if that's okay?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Evelyn, and really lovely to be here this afternoon with this group. Some familiar names and faces and some new ones. For those who don't know me, I'm Swati Pujari. I am project manager at Pathway Fund. Pathway is a social investment wholesaler. We're just around 2 years old now. We're setting up, so we're finishing our setup phase at this point of time, and we focus on investing in the UK with a racial equity lens. Similar to BSc and Access, as a wholesaler, we invest through social investment intermediaries and social investors. I have been working in not at Pathway for as long as Melanie just has, because again, Pathway is, much younger than BSc and Access. But I've been working in the impact investment space for about 10 years now. Initially working in an impact investment fund, investing in South Asia, doing accelerator programs and SME investing. And then in the last 5 years, I've been working in the UK for organizations such as the Impact Investing Institute and then Gender Smart before joining Pathway.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction. Can I just check if everyone can turn their microphones off? I can hear a bit of background noise, so it'd be great if we could ensure everyone's microphones are off so we can hear the speakers. Josh, would you like to introduce yourself as well, please?
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to be here. I'm Josh. I work at Access as a program manager. I think the majority of you probably know who Access are, but just in case you don't, we are also a wholesaler of subsidy, working with our partners, and our partners being the social investors. So we provide the subsidy into the social investment funds that is then passed on to the VCFDs. I've been at Access now just over a year, so I can't claim to know everything. And I'm the program manager for our flexible finance program, a program that we really try to create an inclusive funding process for. A lot of what I talk about today was kind of established before my time here. So just to kind of caveat that, but I am definitely happy to take any questions throughout and anything that I can't answer. Also happy to follow up on.
Great, thank you, Josh. And yeah, just to reiterate that the chat box is open. So if you do have any questions, please place them in there throughout this conversation. But also if you want to come to screen, we will have a Q&A at the end. So just to start the questions off, and this is for each of you really, to speak about a specific example of how your organisation is working towards successfully implementing an inclusive funding process. Swati, would you be willing to start with that, please?
Yes, absolutely. So as I mentioned, Pathway, we are a wholesaler and we invest into charities, social enterprises through intermediaries. At this point, we're running a few pilot programs, an enterprise development pilot, a pilot for first-time fund managers, an incubator for first-time fund managers, and a cost of living support program. So particularly in the enterprise development and cost of living support program, as a wholesaler, we're investing into intermediaries, and then the intermediaries are deploying grant and repayable grant capital into charities and social enterprises. One of the key things for us in the program design has really been co-designing most of the aspects of that program with the intermediary themselves, and essentially, we do have some sort of restrictions, some requirements, primarily around who we can deploy the capital to. So with some of the funding, we can only deploy the capital to charities and social enterprises, whereas some of the fundings we can deploy into like the for-profit sector. So we have some of these, requirements, some of these restrictions that we have to follow. But other than that, what we've tried to do for most part is be very non-prescriptive about how that capital can be used by the charities and by the social enterprises. And in terms of actually designing the program itself, we've always run like a co-design process with the intermediary to do that. So, for example, when we started the enterprise development pilot that is being implemented by Do It Now, which many of you would know of the organization. We ran a co-design process that was led by Do It Now to develop that program. The reason for that being, as a wholesaler, we believe that we're another step removed from the charities and social enterprises, from the communities, from the frontline organizations, and therefore we should essentially not be dictating the terms of how that capital should be used and how that program should run. Do It Now and other intermediaries, they have worked with the communities and with frontline organizations. They have built the trust. They have, they've spent a very long time building that trust and working with the organizations. And there's a lot of learning that comes out of that we have been fortunate to actually be able to use in our program. So the process of actually what that program looks like, defining what that program looks like, and what the capital can be used for has been relatively unprescriptive from us, and that process has to a large extent been led by the intermediary. Developing that process has been led by the intermediary. That being said, the other thing that we do hear quite often from intermediaries is not just around the funding process itself, but also the type of capital and the duration. So absolutely, a lot of our intermediaries, the key messages that we hear from our engagement with intermediaries around the need for like patient, flexible, long-term capital, funders being like long-term partners and not necessarily doing like a one-year funding every year, not having to go through that process of applying for the funds every year. And to be honest, given we are right now running pilots, being a long-term patient funder, flexible funder is our objective. But that being said, right now we are running pilots, so it will absolutely be like the next stage decision for us. But yes, that's one of the key things. What we would love to do is to also co-design beforehand, like actually run co-design processes with multiple intermediaries. But that's a resource intensive process that we honestly do not have the resources for at the moment, because right now we're only able to run the co-design process after we have selected the intermediary. And we also feel that inviting participants to join a design process that eventually that in case it's not compensated for, that does feel quite extractive to us. So we're running a process where we do the co-design after we've selected the intermediary and with that intermediary. But we do understand that if we're able to sort of front load some of that work and run a process with multiple intermediaries, obviously compensating for that time, that would actually bring a more inclusive, more equitable. Yeah, the results of that could be quite different, but that is again sort of having that balance of resources, as well as sort of making sure that we don't run processes that then start seeming extractive.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds really interesting in terms of the co-design element, but also the flexible approach to the finance and being quite open-minded about that. That sounds really good. Thank you for sharing that. And Josh, can I ask you to share a bit about some of the work that you're doing and what you think is working particularly well for Access in terms of having inclusive funding processes?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm here kind of as the program manager for our flexible finance program, a program developed sort of address the, I guess, historical inequalities in social investment, to focus on diverse-led organisations and those typically marginalised from social investment. So what I thought I'd talk about was kind of our process to designing this program. But again, kind of caveat it with, we are also definitely still learning along this process. Not everything that we did necessarily worked, but we attempted things. And yeah, we're here to learn and share our learnings at the same time, to kind of improving everything that we do. So with the flexible finance program, kind of as Swati also just said, we are also the wholesaler. So this process was how we made it inclusive for the social investors to apply for the subsidy to go into their programs. So we started essentially with a quite a comprehensive market consultation, opening up a call for ideas, having one-on-one meetings with potential applicants, and had roundtable discussions with one dedicated to EDI. And from there, we came up with 3 clear priorities for our flexible finance program that were going to be around offering innovative and flexible financing options, kind of bringing in new investors and efficient capital flow to pass that on to the VCSEs, and then finally reaching underserved markets. And to do that, we embedded EDI as a core principle, and the way that we did that was to ask the applicants to demonstrate how they were then going to reach these marginalised and underserved communities. And we did that by asking them to demonstrate one of the 3 principles that were created by the Equality Impact Investing Project. And again, we can share more on this if you're interested. There's a whole paper on it. It is really interesting. But essentially, they have 3 investing principles, and they are investing to support entrepreneurs facing exclusion, investing in organisations with diverse leadership, and significant equality impact, or finally to promote systemic change by tackling structural inequality. So we asked each of the applicants, the social investors, to demonstrate how they met those principles, and they all had to meet at least one of them, with some of them meeting 2 or all 3 of them. So that's kind of how we passed that through from the wholesale level down to the retail level. Next, we also looked at promoting transparency and learning, and we're really committed to this, sharing our data so far and lessons learned. And we do this primarily through our quarterly dashboards. So please do have a look at those on our website. We publish them every quarter along with our user subsidy reports. So we break down kind of the use of grant and where that's going as well. We also had flexibility in our application process to encourage applicants from potentially smaller organisations with limited resources. So we started with a much shorter expression of interest, rather than making applicants kind of fill out the full application from the start. We know it's can be an arduous process, takes up a lot of time. So to save them going through that, we started with an EOI. And then for some organisations, we did provide a development grant of up to £10,000. And this was designed to cover the costs whilst preparing the full application. And then finally, we encouraged collaboration and co-design, encouraged applicants submitting proposals, working on the same thing together, to kind of really encourage new applicants to the space. We had more roundtables and workshops to co-create solutions. But this was one of the things that, as I said, we are learning, and we did get some mixed feedback on this. You know, not everyone liked to kind of be in workshops with people that they considered their potential competitors for the limited pot of grant that we did have.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they're kind of the key principles that we embedded to make our flexible finance kind of as inclusive as we could. But as I say, we're still learning on this journey as well.
Well, thank you, Josh. That was very detailed and really helpful. And also Lydia for sharing the dashboard link. We are recording this session. We're going to post it on our socials and also via our newsletter. So we will include the links that Josh has mentioned and that Lydia has shared in there. But thank you, that's really helpful. So we've spoken about some of the great work that's happening, and obviously people have mentioned that they're on a journey, they're still learning. But Mel, I'd really like you to speak a bit about the investment committees and the work that you're doing with the investment committees of the future and the people that are on that program. Kind of what challenges have they faced, and how does that program support them to kind of overcome those challenges and to address them?
Thanks, Atlin. I mean, yes, I'm just sitting here listening and reflecting, I suppose, just for context for anybody that isn't aware, because we haven't got Kat on the panel today. You're obviously hearing from three wholesalers. And I'm always really conscious, because there's a lot of intermediaries on the call, that we have a huge responsibility to effect and impact change. But I'm always really conscious that that then pushes down responsibility through our partners for everybody that we collaborate with. We were the earliest of the wholesalers. Is that a good or a bad thing? We probably made the most mistakes. We also don't have any grant capital to come alongside, and so absolutely rely on collaboration, either with other partners to bring in that level of subsidy, and also then to scale the amount of inward capital. So I thought I would just start at the end, which, as you say, Atlin, is about the investment committee process. And some of this actually comes from, you know, when I first came to BSc, we're very fortunate to have the opportunity for an open and transparent investment committee. But if I'm really honest, I was completely intimidated when I used to sit in that room and listen to the level of discussion. And I think one of the things that has become apparent over time, particularly as we've got better at sharing data, is that there is ultimately a responsibility and a role to have diversity in thought around those that have the power to ultimately make the decision on where the funding and the finance goes through investment committees. And so we, through Good Finance, which is jointly supported by Better Society Capital and Access, we created the investment committees of the Future programme. And I am delighted to say that we do live these values at BSc, because I can see an investment committee member of BSc sitting on the call. So Patricia will be smiling at me, I'm sure. And we also have Lisa Hilder. So we, again, have made sure that within our investment committee, that we've got a range of different opinions, voices, lived experience that can bring their own essential skills, questions and challenges to the process. But being on an investment committee, even if you've not had the opportunity to sit and observe, is quite a challenging thing. And actually, it's definitely tested my own assumptions that I think many people who think about sitting on an investment committee feel a sense of imposter syndrome. But when I sort of started to think about this at the beginning, actually, I made some assumptions that perhaps people who came from different lived experience or learned experience within financial background wouldn't feel that sense of imposter syndrome. And I can absolutely say that's not the case, having run investment committees of the future, which is an e-learning program, which essentially tries to give anybody who's thinking about joining an investment committee, or actually just wants to know what happens, because it's quite difficult. These are usually happening in closed spaces because of the level of confidentiality. And it gives individuals an opportunity to know what it's like, to see real papers that have been anonymised, to have the opportunity to ask peers questions. And I would also, again, be honest enough to say that some of this comes from my own lived experience of feeling, you know, very out of my depth in the early days, and being asked when a new fund was being created, one of the intermediaries, and being, you know, asked if I knew people that might be able to sit on that investment committee. And when I took the list to my line manager, she asked me why I hadn't put myself on the list. And I think I said something like, well, I sold ladies' clothes for 20 years. So like, how will I be able to do that? She said, no, Mel, you're missing the point. And I have to say, I was very fortunate. I had a really good first experience of being on an investment committee. But there was so much that I wish that I had have known. And I had an opportunity. And I think it is about giving people, often it's not about having the skills to contribute, it's about having the confidence to contribute. And I'm sure as we chat through some more of these questions, we'll talk a bit more about some of the challenges and barriers that exist to perhaps changing the dynamic that exists on perhaps still too many investment committees.
Thank you, Mel, and thank you, Olivia, for sharing the link to that. So if anyone's interested, the link to the Investment Committees of the Future is in the chat. So, Josh, when you were giving your introduction, you mentioned the dashboards, and Lydia shared the link, but it'd be really helpful, I guess, to kind of share, how do you measure the impact of your inclusive funding initiatives and ensure accountability? What kind of metrics are you looking at?
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. It's a very good question, and we do have Lydia on the call, who is our head of impact. So I'm sure she'll be testing my answer. But essentially, we collect quite a lot of data quarterly. Every partner, every investor that's on a fund with us submits quarterly data that all then feeds into the dashboards that you just received the link to. So do go and check those out, and we can really we use that to really analyze kind of our progress so far and how we're doing, and benchmark and compare programs on like-for-like metrics. One of those metrics being the diversity in leadership across sector characteristics. So Black and minority, disability, women, LGBT, to really understand where funding is going. So it's both the leadership of the organisations and then also the organisations, sorry, the communities that the organisation then supports. So we track both to see who they're also supporting. Yeah, and we're really keen to be as transparent as possible about that. So we have EDI KPIs for each of our programs, and you can see them again on the website and how we're tracking against those. And we also regularly write reports and blogs kind of showing best practice as well. So we do currently have a blog again on our website on our flexible finance program, kind of outlining it's not what we do, is what our partners are doing, and how they're really targeting those underserved communities. Yeah, and then constantly sharing data, sharing learnings, sharing challenges, trying to be transparent as possible with our partners, so we can hear their challenges and pass our challenges on to them as well. Lydia, is there anything that you wanted to add to that since you're here?
No, I think that's pretty comprehensive. Yes, I guess just to say the KPIs on the individual kind of EDI KPIs in each of the funds on flexible finance are obviously kind of co-created with each social investor to understand what's realistic, what's possible, and are not, flexible finance is so each individual fund is very specific and very in trying to achieve something different. So it's about, I think, on the impact side, deciding what success looks like for each separate fund, not having a kind of blanket approach of this is what impact looks like on EDI on this one program, because that wouldn't work on a program like flexible finance at all, or across other programs.
Oh, thank you, Lydia, for adding that. That's really helpful and interesting. And so in terms of the dashboards and the metrics, do you have like targets, or is it something you're working towards? Is that how it would work in terms of measuring the impact that you're having?
Yeah, so happy to jump in on that as well. So we have on flexible finance, we have specific fund level targets that we work, like I mentioned, with the social investors on. But then we also have an overall KPI that we're looking for around reach. And for that, we're comparing what we used the census data to try and understand the demographics of IMD 1 to 3, so the 30% most deprived parts of England, And then we're comparing how we're doing across all of our programs to those demographics, because we don't, we are specifically targeting those areas. So we're looking to do better than simply funding what's kind of the leadership of organisations that are representative of the whole country. We're looking to fund the sort of a percentage that of leaders of organisation of VCSEs that are similar to those 30% most deprived areas. And we are shortly in the next round of dashboards going to be adding that specific EDI kind of breakdown, where you can really look into each of our programs, see where we're doing better, see where we're doing worse. We're doing much worse on disability. We know that it's an area that we're working on, and that we know that our social investor partners are working on as well. To really be able to dig into how we're doing on different types of diversity. And yeah, so have a look at that at our next round of dashboards, and you'll be able to dig into it in much more detail.
Yeah, no, definitely we'll look at that when that's published. I do think it's a really interesting thing to understand how you determine the target. And I think, how you describe the census is really beneficial, but also how you're doing, and also the additional things initiatives you may undertake to delve into, as I said, the disability kind of metric and how you can support that and increase that. What would you do? And I guess it's just helpful for others to understand who maybe are trying to, support other communities that maybe they're underperforming at the moment, and what can they put in place to increase the awareness from there. So again, it'll be really interesting to follow up, and we will share that from the Diversity Forum links to the report when it's available. I think that'll be really interesting for others to read. But thank you so much, Josh and Lydia, for sharing that. I appreciate it. So Swati, I'm going to kind of turn to you now, really, just in terms of maybe some just general advice. What would you give to organisations, particularly social investors, who are seeking to make their funding processes more inclusive? What would be kind of some advice that you'd give them as terms of a starting point and things that they should be looking at?
I think a lot of what Melanie, Josh, and Lydia have discussed today does sort of share. It is part of sort of sharing advice, I suppose. But if I can sort of summarize that in a few specific areas of work, I suppose. I think one of the key things is to have sort of governance level commitment, sort of have that conversation with whether it is your board, your trustees, your leadership, because it does need to be it's not as a lot of us will have experienced, or will I suppose agree to it. It's not like a flavor of the month kind of a work, so absolutely your leadership needs to be on board, your whether it is the board or the just that level of conversation needs to happen, and also sort of build your own learnings around this, because again, EDI is not it's not like a tick box exercise, and you can't just talk about inclusion without talking about power. So really have the in-depth conversation with the board, have the in-depth conversation with your leadership, get that commitment to start with, and also, like I said, build your own learning. Like don't a lot of the times the inclusion and diversity related work becomes like an add-on to people with lived experience. Don't sort of have that not a process, I'm not sure what the word is I'm looking for, but it's not essentially like additional work to give to people with lived experience. It is a process that the organization needs to go through, and you as people in the organization, you do need to build your own learnings and do the work to build that learning. And then I think also, if we look at inclusion, and if we look at participation, inclusion, diversity, it's Melanie mentioned this earlier, it's not a silver bullet. There isn't one way of doing things, and it is a process. So acknowledging that, you know, you will not get everything right the first time you try it. It is a spectrum. It is essentially like a ladder, and different organizations are at different steps of that ladder. So in some way, the important thing is to start climbing that, as opposed to sort of thinking of, you know, where at that ladder you are at, or like whether or not you're at the top step. So start that process, I think. And the other thing, from the perspective of whether it is like funder or intermediary or social investor, one of the things is also that a lot of the times, you know, the organizations you would like to invest in are not necessarily like that pipeline building work is always there. Capacity building, pipeline building work is always going to be there. So this expectation that just because you want to invest in a diverse-led organization, that diverse-led organization already exists and you can just sort of pick someone and invest in that, may not be the reality of the sector. There is work that needs to be done to build the pipeline and to build the capacity of organizations as well. And it goes across the spectrum. You know, in some cases, it is the need to build capacity of social investors and intermediaries. In some cases, it is the need to build a pipeline of charities and social enterprises. So that sort of work on building that capacity also exists. I think sometimes investors tend to have this idea that, you know, oh, I have the money, I want to do this, but there is no pipeline. So whose responsibility is it to build that pipeline is also a very, very important question to ask yourself, you know. And finally, the last thing that I would mention here is around being transparent. Share the process, share the learnings, share that information, because a lot of us are learning, a lot of the organizations in the sector, we are learning from our own work, but also to a large extent from the work of other people, from the work of other organizations. Access, BSc, and also Pathway, we're very interested in and very open to share our learnings and also talk about our mistakes. Another important thing to do, I suppose, in this process is to share your learning, share your journey, be transparent about it. So yeah, I mean, if I could sort of summarize in a few things, like governance and board, make sure you talk to them. Don't sort of, use this as a way of adding on to the responsibilities of lived experience, people with lived experiences. Make sure you know that there is the pipeline building, capacity building work. It's not a ready-made space to invest. You have to put in that pipeline building work as well, and then I suppose be transparent about what you've learned and what you've done.
Brilliant. That's a great summary. So thank you. I really appreciate that. So before we open the floor for questions, please do put them in the chat, or if you want to ask a question, put your hand up. Just ask Mel and Josh if there's anything else you'd like to add in terms of how we can remain focused in terms of creating inclusive funding processes and ensuring that it remains a priority for everyone in the sector.
Yeah, and if I can, just to finish up on the investment committee angle here. So when we started doing research, we found out that less than half of all investment committee positions were ever advertised externally. So if we are truly going to have diversity of thought and have a range of experience, we need to make sure that that's open and transparent, and it's not limited to the really small, network. So I'd actively encourage anybody that's on this call, if your organization has an investment committee or a grant making panel, please, Good Finance will share that position. We now have many people who've been through investment committees of the future. Not all of them will actually elect or decide they want to go on to be investment committee members. Actually, that's fine. But please do make a commitment to share those positions. To do that, and this sort of builds on Swati's summary, having that conversation, can you really say that you don't have bias or blind spots around the value, how you value learned experience over lived experience? How many times I've heard, well, what we need is somebody with a bit more financial or more venture expertise or more of this. Actually, maybe you need somebody who's run an enterprise. And I was talking to Unlimited a couple of weeks ago, and some really good practice that I want to go and explore over there. We also need to make sure that the role of the chair is so vital in making sure that when we do bring diversity of thought, that thought gets heard and doesn't feel that sense of imposter syndrome. There's some really good practice, again, that I've seen and know something. This is one thing I can say that we do at BSc. We always invite our external members to go first, so that there's not influenced by exco or people that are in the deal team. I think that's really important. But the role of the chair, because actually it's one thing to appoint people, but how are you inclusive in the processes that will ensure that people have confidence then to go on and deliver their best experience and their best knowledge to inform the decision making? And then this sort of annual review, a 360 review, so that you can say to all of your investment committee members, what did you feel that you were able to contribute? What did your experience change? Whether that, and that's not always going to be in the context of what you're doing here today. It might be much broader, because if we are going to make sure that we have more diverse representation, more lived experience in the decision-making process, then we would want and expect our decisions to be different. So I think that's really important. And I'm just sort of building on, again, Mina was building on Swati's comment in the chat about not underestimating the role that the funder has over the investee. I've seen this through feedback from the investee. I'm also really conscious of it in the wholesale relationship. How many times will wholesalers say to the intermediaries, what we want is your really honest feedback? And it's really difficult to do that when essentially we're the people that then hold the money that might come on further down the line. So I think being really conscious of that is really important. So yeah, those would be the things that I would add, certainly in terms of, essentially, if we're going to co-design investment processes and we are going to be more inclusive in the data and the targets, then we also have to make sure that essentially the final decision making when a deal comes to investment committees is clearly part of the same process, because they're all connected.
Great points, Mel. Thank you so much for adding that. And I guess lastly, Josh, if it's okay, if I could ask you a bit about the collaboration piece. I think everyone's really mentioned it, and obviously part of the role of the Diversity Forum is to support and facilitate that collaboration. What are your thoughts in terms of how can collaboration be used to ensure that we kind of keep building on these inclusive funding processes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of collaboration, I touched on that already a lot in terms of sharing learning, sharing challenges, sharing failures even, to really understand how to best be as inclusive as you can. As well as sharing best practices, in terms of building it into your culture. How did you do that? How did you go about, as Mel said, kind of bringing in other people? I think collaboration can also work really well to bring in expert organisations. So if you're delivering a fund together, you can bring in an expert DEI organisation to either kind of consult on the way that you're doing things and have a look and give you some really honest feedback and approaches to how to improve, or you kind of co-deliver the fund together in order to reach those targets. Yeah, I think that's maybe the key things I would say. I think most of it has already been mentioned.
Yeah.
Around that, yeah.
We've covered a lot, so yeah, appreciate that, Josh. And we've had several comments come into the chat now. So I wonder, I'd like to kind of see if anyone else would like to add to the conversation. Mina, Patricia, or Barbara, would either of you like to kind of jump in and share your thoughts around, pipeline or power, or any other key points that have been made today?
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak, and I'm really delighted that I'm at an event, because this is the first time I've ever been in an event like this and being part of this conversation. And as an infrastructure organisation that is there to do that structural building of Black leaders, of voluntary and community sector and social enterprises, all the things that you talk about are the challenges that we're trying to address. But investment for us, I've never come across it. We were created immediately out of COVID-19 to try and bring about systems change on the one hand, and to bring the leaders up to the level where they can really grow their services, which are really essential.
Introduce your company that you're with, who you're representing. Sorry, just
so the organisation, it's called Canara CIC, and it's based in Lewisham in southeast London, and it is an infrastructure organisation that aims to grow the Black third sector through finance. And it's not that we're going to give it to people, it's that they access what is available. So the vital services they provide to the underserved communities are sustainable and move away from being one-year projects, which is a big problem, and exacerbates the inequality that everybody's trying to achieve. So that's our organisation. So I think the kind of conversation that you're having here is kind of the space where I feel we need to be. But I don't know how I came across this event, and it just feels like these are the kind of conversations that we kind of need to be in. And I particularly like the idea about me not having to feel that I'm responsible for bringing about the change personally, and that the system actually takes that on board and enables that to happen. So all of this is very, very relevant. And I guess for Kinara, it's just thinking about how does an organisation like ours become, you know, a part of this kind of forum and conversations and the relationships that there would be possible to have here for mutual benefits, really.
Yeah, Mel's just popped something in the chat there in terms of maybe reaching out, Barbara, and maybe ways in which you can get more involved. So thank you for sharing that, and hopefully this session today will lead to you know, you being able to, you know, have a voice and be able to influence and be part of the discussion going forward. Thank you for sharing your email as well. I appreciate that. So anyone who's interested in liaising with Barbara, please do reach out to her. Mina or Patricia, would you like to add anything, or anybody else want to kind of come to the floor and mention something?
Sorry, just quickly, just because it follows on, my point in the chat was really very much what Barbara put on the table, which is, you know, we can talk that there's no pipeline and it's difficult, but there are hundreds of thousands of organizations out there, charities, social enterprises, community company, you know, interest company, etc. They just don't get a seat at this table. They are not in this ecosystem regularly, you know, and when you talk to them, that is the frustration. And then also, I mean, often they're not invited because they're not necessarily seen as suitable. They're not offering the perfection that some people, you know, seem to want from our sector, right, in the social investment sector. So I do think, you know, Barbara and many like her have to have a seat at this table. We have to find more forums and more, you know, if you create a panel, rather than maybe having 3 wholesalers, you might have one who is, you know, one of the pipeline and one of the benefiting organizations, just to mix it up. That would be my suggestion, because again, I find it really difficult to hear that, you know, there's not enough out there, because there's plenty. We just are not reaching them in the most effective way. And I think people will agree with that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Patricia. It's a great point. We were due to have Kat on the call here today, but she's unfortunately got COVID, but understood. I think we definitely could look at that for the upcoming webinars and implement that. So thank you. Mel, did you want to add something as well here?
I do want to add something. I want to ask a question of somebody that's on that. I'm putting them on the spot, so they may not, they may feel. But I think Bailey's on the call from Decamai, and I was just going to ask a question about how this manifests in Scotland, because I know that they've done more work around access to finance. So I just really I'll share the report link afterwards, but I don't know if she's there, but I just thought it might be interesting to know from a different nation's perspective what their challenges are. Are they any different? What did they find?
Hi Mel, thank you. I was just walking into a workshop, but I'll be able to just chip in. Firstly, thank you for creating this forum. I've been able to I've been able to come twice to the workshops, and it's always interesting listening to what has been said and what's being developed. In Scotland, we're a little bit further behind, although some of the wholesalers have signed the Diversity Manifesto, but when it comes to, I guess, ring-fest support for people from the global majority, there isn't anything like the Pathways Fund. I've had a conversation with Swati before. So the support tends to be a one-size-fits-all. However, today we did launch an investment readiness program with a particular focus for underrepresented founders. So that is one step in the right direction. But at this moment in time, the Scottish Government and other wholesalers don't have financial resources to put behind support, grants, and particular investment for the global majority in Scotland.
Thank you, Bailey, for sharing that. Appreciated. Would anybody else like to add another question before we round up things?
If I may add a point and add to sort of the point that Patricia and Barbara so eloquently made, absolutely agree with what's being said here. And our understanding in the sector is that, yes, a lot of charities and enterprises, intermediaries, particularly Black and ethnic minoritized-led organizations, there is a lack of trust with the social investment sector, and that's not without reason. It's absolutely like a valid lack of trust in the social investment sector, and that pipeline building or pipeline conversation. I think the question of where does that responsibility lie? It's very much an important question, because it's sort of not enough to just have an open call for applications, right? I mean, you do need to, as funders, as investors, the responsibility of finding the pipeline, the responsibility of building that pipeline, building that trust does lie with the funders, with the investors, and some of that work needs to be done in sort of targeted manners. And we see, particularly with like flexible finance or with some of the global majority funds, etc., there are some targeted approaches that are happening, but certainly looking at the scale of the gap and the scale of like the supply of capital, there is a big mismatch. If we also look at it from like a geography point of view, there is a focus on place-based investing, and so that sort of looking at the way capital is deployed, that targeted approach is absolutely necessary, and it's I think I just want to stress that it is the responsibility of the funders to build those mechanisms, to build the way to reach the pipeline, and not expect that organizations just sort of know about funding just because we've put an open call for applications.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, and Swati, and Livy's just shared some information with regards to the program that Bud Leaders is going to be supporting. There's a session on the 16th of October, and literally this is about supporting social enterprises in terms of understanding the funding processes, and so that could be a really good way to help with that, raising awareness as well. So I'd like to say a big thank you to our panelists today. It's been really insightful hearing all the recommendations that you've shared and the journey that you're on. In terms of the Diversity Forum, we have lots of resources on our website, including the EDI kit, that can also help social investors on their journey in terms of building more inclusive processes and practices. So please do take a look at the Diversity Forum website or reach out to us as well via email. I'm just going to also highlight our upcoming webinars where, we are really looking to have a diverse, range of people to take part and to have a voice to share their thoughts. So, Barbara, if you're interested in any of these topics, we are always looking for volunteers to join the panel. So in terms of our upcoming themes and topics, inclusive recruitment and team diversity is one that our signatories have mentioned. So, they are also keen to kind of have diverse colleagues working in their organizations. So they understand the importance that will bring, but how do you go about attracting people to join your organization and retaining them? So we've got that as our next theme on the 4th of November. And then on the 2nd of December, we'll be talking about inclusive leadership and executive action. We really want the leaders of these organizations, as Swati mentioned, your board members and the leaders really taking an active role in EDI rather than delegating it to others in the organization. So how can we take a really leader-led approach for lasting change within the social investment sector? So again, if anyone here has got any case studies or guidance they'd like to share, want to have a voice, please do get in touch, because we'd love to have you on the panel. But again, if anyone is interested in becoming signatories or wants to have further information, please do take a look at the website. It's diversityforum.org.uk. So thanks again, everyone, for joining, and a special thanks to Mel, Swati, and Josh. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope you've all found the session beneficial and useful. If you do have any feedback or things that we can do better, please do get in touch. We'd also love to hear your feedback on the webinars and the resources that we have available via the Diversity Forum. But thank you all. It's been great. Take care now. Bye-bye.